Is Utah leaving the Big 12 for the ACC? According to a Hall of Fame sports writer, there is discussion about the Utes doing exactly that. But is this something with legitimacy to it or just our typical realignment fodder? Here is the tweet. It's from Dick Weiss, longtime New York Post sports writer. More on him in just a moment, but this is what has set off all of the discussion. Speculation is circulating about potential shifts in college sports conferences. There's discussion about Utah possibly moving to the ACC despite its recent move to the Big 12, with some suggesting the ACC might be a better fit due to its ESPN network agreement and the potential for increased TV value. However, skepticism exists regarding the stability and attractiveness of the ACC compared to the Big 12. And Dick Weiss is a former New York Daily News columnist. And hey, look, I know it's an impressive outlet, but not exactly a college football hotbed. So fair enough on the pushback there. And his last byline in the New York Daily News, at least according to Google searches online, is 2018. But he is somebody that's in the Sports Writers Hall of Fame, so he carries some credibility with him. I do think it's fair to say that the conference realignment world and reporting, it's a little bit different. If you are not somebody that's consistently reporting about this or in the weeds of college athletics, very, very tough to get legitimate realignment scoops. And all you have to do is just go trace back the history of all this. It takes unique situations to get these big, big scoops like Brent Zwerneman from the Houston Chronicle, who broke Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC. He, of course, was covering Texas A&M. Texas A&M was upset about Texas and Oklahoma, particularly Texas, coming to the SEC, so they leaked the news to him. Things like that can happen when you are knee deep in the game. So I'm inclined to say I respect Dick Weiss's career, but it's tough to believe that he would be getting a real juicy, legitimate realignment scoop, which this would be. But really, all you need to do is just take a look at the logic of this thing. If you break it down step by step, it's tough to see how Utah would make this work. First of all, the ACC is a mess. Why would anybody voluntarily at this point go into a conference that is currently fighting four different lawsuits against two teams that are taking place in three different states? It's a lot going on, a lot of billable hours, and you're fighting literally against schools in your conference who do not want to be there. We know that Florida State and Clemson are out one way or another, and North Carolina, probably others aren't far behind, letting Florida State and Clemson do the dirty work for them right now. And then there's the matter of TV partner ESPN, who has an out. It's in 2027. They can get out of the rest of the TV contract, and that decision is coming up in February. So Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, maybe Miami, maybe Virginia, possibly ESPN. All of these parties could be out on the ACC within the next couple of years. Is that something you're going to want to join right now? Some have pointed to the fact that Bill Farley, who did a great job of reporting this, got a hold of the copy of Utah's agreement with the Big 12, and they are exempt from the 99-year conference member agreement. Basically, just they are not a part of signing up for the Big 12 for 99 years. That sounds important. That sounds daunting, but Texas and Oklahoma signed that, and it didn't really matter very much in the end when they were getting out of the league, which I imagine is why the Big 12 granted that to Utah. However, the Utes are still a part of the Big 12 grant of rights with the new TV deal, and that is something that has some legitimate teeth to it. Ask Florida State and Clemson, who are currently fighting in court trying to get out of that. So Utah would be putting itself into a similar position to Florida State and Clemson, a little better. They're not tied into it until 2036. It would be 2031, but that still is not going to come for free. There is going to be a legitimate cost to try and get out of the grant of rights. Haven't even discussed here that Utah might be taking a reduced share if they were to join the ACC. Is Utah right now worth enough to be additive to the ACC's deal? Are they going to push the envelope enough as a national brand? Look, Utah carries much more of a big stick in terms of how they are in the football field than what they are as a national brand. And that's the harsh reality in a world where brands really matter. We just saw Cal, Stanford, and obviously SMU take reduced shares to join the ACC. Florida State, Clemson, lots of schools push back against adding new members. I'm sure there would be a fight there. They are not going to do anything that takes away money from Florida State and Clemson right now. So is Utah going to be willing to pay the Big 12 and then go at some sort of a reduced rate or a ramp up rate to the ACC? Again, it just does not seem to make much sense. And on top of that, would the payout, even if it's a full payout in the ACC, is it going to be financially worth it with what it costs to get out of the Big 12 to be making more money here? You're probably making less in one way or another with all of this, especially with how short the lifespan of the ACC seems to be at this point. I All of this for what would be the question that I would ask on Utah. We know, and if you pay attention at all to the fans on Twitter or X, that Utah fans are not incredibly enthused about being here. Utah fancied itself a coastal elite among the Pac 12. They liked going to LA. They liked going to Palo Alto. They liked going to those venues and cities to play college football games. They are not fans of what they have deemed not so lovingly the truck stop conference in the Big 12. But is it worth jumping on the college football version of the Titanic, which is the ACC right now? Leaving the Big 12 is worth getting on the Titanic, hanging out there as the ship sinks, all of that just so that you can be with who you consider your peers in the college football realm in Clemson and Florida State, or your peers in the cultural realm, perhaps in Cal and Stanford. Look, Utah's ultimate goal, as it should be, is to become a Power 2 member, which would be the Big Ten or the SEC, probably more likely the Big Ten in this case. And they are perhaps on the fringe of that, depending on what the cutoff is going to be if and when we get there. But the best path there is to stay and try to dominate the Big 12, build things up here as opposed to take a messy, expensive divorce to jump on a sinking ship for whatever the reason might be. Greg Flugar, who is very well connected and a guy who has a channel, peek around the corner. Make sure you subscribe to his channel for great college football content. He's the one that broke USC heading to the Big Ten. He knows what's going on, and he has mentioned multiple times that Utah has generated at least some level of discussion with the Big Ten. So if that's the case, sit back, dominate, wait your turn. Hell, even Kyle Whittingham, Utah head coach, dropped in September a hint that he thinks Utah will be in the Big Ten before too long.
I can tell you right now, we'll play UCLA again down the road because it's going to change again. And there's going to be, a massive shift. And I think UCLA and Utah will probably end up in the same situation.
And we haven't even touched on the fact that if we're talking about when this could happen, look, we are months away from the judge approving a settlement in the House case, which is bringing landmark changes to college athletics, revenue sharing, all of that you hear so much about. So nothing is going to happen until everybody knows how exactly that's going to play out and what the new college football world will look like. And some of that will include Congress. Will there be any sort of congressional act to codify this or keep more lawsuits from happening to the NCAA? Why go through a messy, expensive divorce when your ultimate hope is not the ACC? It's the Big Ten. Conference realignment is crazy. I don't think we're that crazy yet where you're going to get lower two of the Power 4 hopping before somebody tries to jump into the actual Power 2. In conclusion, I am not trying to throw shade at Dick Weiss here necessarily. Respect the guy, his sportswriter career. But if you look at who has broken major stories about conference realignment, I mentioned Brent Zwerneman at Texas A&M, who was covering the Aggies in a unique situation there. Greg Flugar, very, very well embedded in the college football world, who had the USC story months before everybody. And then when it actually happened, it was John Wilner who broke USC and UCLA. And Wilner is somebody who's been covering the Pac-12 for years and is the most well-connected on that beat. So it is a little hard to believe that a scoop would come to a former New York Daily News columnist, even if he is a Hall of Fame sports writer. It's just kind of a different game. And this one doesn't logically make a whole lot of sense. We'll talk much more about it coming up on the next live show. Wednesdays and Sundays, I am live. They are a blast. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can be a part of that. Share this channel with your friends. Like the video. All of that really helps me. And leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Do you buy that there's any chance that Utah would leave for the ACC? And are they going to dominate the Big 12? Let me know in those comments. Subscribe to the channel. Greatly appreciate all of you guys checking this out. And if you want to stay up to date on what is going on in the ACC and if Clemson, North Carolina, Florida State, etc., are going to get out, make sure you click the link.